Deacon Sakari. We back at it like a crack addict. They done let them bruise in the dough in this wicked industry to shine the light. They done let them bruise in the dough. Oh shit. They done let them bruise in the dough. They done let them bruise in the dough. They done let them bruise in the dough. We ain't going nowhere. Hebrews. They done let them bruise in the dough. They done let them bruise in the dough. Look, Joe Biden need to free Dark. Lo, the hell is wrong with dude? No Alamolek, but I got perfect vision in the dark. I'm a lexicon, I'm a megalodon, all my verses ripping them apart. Mosaic law, what the church is missing, it's the worst religion from the start. In my soul, where the word is written out, that circumcision of the heart. I'm rocking my fringes, I'm in Seattle, rocking like Hendrix. No industry gimmicks, you rappers are finished, I'm kicking it off the hinges. Throwing stones like you sinless till you get the business. You should have repented in a minute, this truth is endless, they loving the image. I know what happened to Kim. I keep my pencil on point, no sharpener. Used to weigh pounds of troll, I lay down the flow like carpenters. She causing division in the sisterhood, I'm marking on. I'm preparing the way for the harvester, I'm a harbinger. Cops hop out, we bail on them. Leviticus, I like my fish with scales on them. Ask Chief Ephraim, he could vouch. We be putting in the work while you sitting on the couch. Camp haters quiet as a mouse. Yeah, already shout out to my brother Austin Trout. Just as a reminder if there's doubt, I wear every single fringe even when I'm in the house. Get all your truth music at deaconsakari.com. That's 9 albums. We even got a couple free for y'all. Support the cause, y'all. I see a lot of haters. I knew it would come with it. Rap game full of evil and sin, and I don't want none of it. They bite my style. They just want to take it and run with it. Sakari Varsity Online Academy, specializing in Hebrew apologetics. Come learn how to defend the gospel. Email sakariseattle@gmail.com. Limited registration. Or your one-hit wonder list. You can call me the Deacon, but just put the strong right in front of it. World of sin, sedition of men. I know the Most High is my ruler. My neighborhood full of drug deals, blood spills from fire and Rugers. These niggas getting crazy. I seen them do a drive-by in the Uber. I tell them come back to the law, statutes, and commandments of Lion of Judah. But some people think we finally back on. Children's Bibles with black and brown images. I know a lot of y'all been waiting. A lot of people on back order. We still got some though. Put your order in before it's too late. I'm gonna start having them regularly, Lord willing. But get it in, let's go. Hit me up, DM. Even your head wrap, stay dipped, stay brewed dripping. All right, deaconsakari.com. All right, y'all, go to czyn.network. czyn.network. We done with Patreon. No more Patreon. czyn.network. You're going to get videos too hot for YouTube or early releases. So go sign up. Promo code Deacon Sakari. Promo code Deacon Sakari. Promo code Deacon Sakari. Not only do you get Deacon Sakari's content, you get Guerrilla Hebrew content, Hassad content, other camps putting their content on this platform. We need our own app, so sign up using promo code Deacon Sakari. czyn.network. It's our own app, our own platform. The white man can no longer subvert or hide or try to censor this truth. So sign up and get this heat. Promo code Deacon Sakari. Promo code Deacon Sakari. Promo code Deacon Sakari. CZYN.
Go! Yahweh, I'm giving you all my attention. It's you I'ma please. I am not a dream chaser, but when it comes to Yahweh, you can bet I be meek. You better not be twerking when you hear the beat. No, this ain't for the wicked and freaks. She wanna be Jezebel, I tell her go to hell. I do not think we should meet.
Everybody go to Saint LaFlame's YouTube to get the full video. I'm co-signing him. He's up next. Introducing Super Thanks. YouTube has now added a feature where you can donate if you missed the live show by just clicking the heart button with the thanks on it. It'll be on every video. It'll highlight your comment to bring more attention to your statement. So if it's on your heart, super thanks. Shalom. Popping mollies and putting powder in your nostrils. We be in the trenches, needles under benches, we be giving them the gospel. I keep 12 Sakari members with me, we be moving like apostles. True. Some sisters is dead traps, hair rascals, just still a thought though. The church don't even know the truth, they can even tell you an Israelite. Arabs selling you all the switches and the malt liquor are the Ishmaelites. You can show a nigga slave ships in the Bible, still won't get it right. Until the time's out, then a nigga gotta find out what them missiles like.
Mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check. What is going on, y'all? Mic check, mic check. All right, 1 second. How's the audio? How's the audio? How's the video? I know the visual's good, but how is the audio? Is it good? Ooh, I should have took this shirt to the press. Oh, well, it's not about me today. It's about my nephews and nieces out there. Shirt too. All right. All praises, y'all. First and foremost, let's start this off by giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh. We do so by Shema Mashiach Yahweh Shai. Peace and blessings to everybody that is in attendance, and also to those who will watch the post recording. I'm your dear beloved brother Deacon Sakari, and we are back with another one. Boy, they try to clean up, they try to get the broom, they try to get the mop, they try to get the duster, they try to get the pressure washer to clean up all this dirt that they've done in their communities. All this dirt. So somebody said, how do I get my beard so clean without a razor? This is not razor sharp, sir. Just follow. I'm blessed with a natural line, and I thank the Most High for that. I'm blessed with a natural hairline, but the Lord, natural beard line, but the Lord took my hairline. So he knew that if I would have had a hairline, he know I would have been a bad mama jamma. I'm joking, but yeah. So these devils, they trying to clean it up. And this is the same guy from that YouTube channel, Unpacked. The same guy from that YouTube channel, Unpacked, who made a video some months ago that a lot of brothers responded to. A lot of brothers responded to that video. I didn't get a chance to respond to it because I feel like brothers adequately and sufficiently debunked the guy. You guys see his face on the thumbnail. You should recognize him. He has like 200,000 subscribers, and he's a small hat. If you don't know what a small hat is, he's Jewish. He's Amalekite. All right, from the seed of Amalek, Esau, Edomite. The water for the super chat donation, brother from Manasseh. Greatly appreciate you. All praise. It's good to be here, though, for those of you who have been praying for me. I really need it daily. And there's nothing really going on. So you go through your seasons. You go in season, out of season, right? In the storm, out the storm, back in the storm, right? So thank the Most High that He's gracious and merciful. And a lot of times my struggles in my personal walk with the Most High is keeping my mental straight, mental therapy, not staying focused because we're focused, right? But just, the stress on your mental from how much you do, how many people you have to deal with, family, life issues. And so if anybody's praying for me, just pray for a peace of mind and good health. That's all I could ask for. Anyway, though, I see a lot of my Brothers and sisters in the chat, peace and blessings to the regular supporters of the channel. Peace and blessings to y'all. If you're new, shalom, 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 peace. What's happening? It's all the same. Who thinks they know what I'm about to talk about? If you've seen his video from earlier, don't comment. But who thinks they know what I'm about, what this small hat, what this Jewish man is about to admit about what they are responsible for? Who thinks they know, who didn't see his video that he put out earlier today? Let me see who's in the spirit. All right. Yeah. He must have seen it. You seen the video. Look at this dude trying to say he guessed it. David S. So you guessed the whole damn title without watching his video. If you did, you're a bad nigga. So yeah, y'all. And it's hard for he said, I can't lie to you. We go really global with the water for keeping the $2 drive alive. Really appreciate you for supporting the ministry. Hit that like button. Now it's hard for the small hats to admit their involvement in so I gotta kind of talk in code here. That's why I couldn't put it in the title, because it'll affect the algorithm. So how can I say it? What's the acronym? What's a good acronym we could use for the transatlantic situation? What's a good acronym? Come on, y'all, help me out. We're about to make up some code words here so they can't block this video from going viral, because that's what they do. They really have AI look out for keywords that will stop your video from going viral. Yeah, the TSAT. There we go. Okay, we'll just say that. The TSAT. The TSAT. I like that. I like that. I like the TAST. All right. TAST. All right. Let's use that. Let's use that. So if you guys don't know what a small hat is, you should know what a small hat is. You should know what a small hat is. Yeah. The people who give oral circumcisions. So the small hats have a hard time admitting their involvement in the TAST. All right. The small hats have a hard time admitting their involvement in the TAST. Because remember, the Bible says, for one, they try to separate themselves from being white or a Caucasian. Yeah, the Revelation 2 and 9ers. Oh, yeah. Or the 1948ers. The 1948ers. I like that too. So they have a hard time admitting their involvement in the TAST because they try to separate themselves from the rest of the Caucasians when they're Caucasians. It's just so stupid. And then they also purport that they're under the curses, because the Bible says they're under the curses. But the curses say that the Israelites, the Hebrews, will be in bondage in every nation that they went to, but you guys were in every nation having another group of people in bondage. So you guys do fulfill the curses. Ain't that crazy? We got to stop saying they don't fit the curses. They do fit the curses. Remember, it says the Hebrews would be the tail, and the strangers, the Gentiles, would be the head. So they do fit the curses, but they're on the blessing side of the curses of Deuteronomy 28. Remember, it said you would serve your enemies. That's them having us in bondage. So they do fit Deuteronomy 28 as who will be putting the curses on us. They are the ones who will be putting the curses on us. So this is why they try to absolve themselves from the TAST and try to act like they didn't have no role in putting our people in subjugation and bondage, because the Bible says that they're supposed to be the ones in bondage, but they had us in bondage, right? And also too, they want to try to disassociate themselves from their counterparts, their Edomite Caucasian cohorts, if you will, right? So without further ado, I'm gonna play some of this video and we're gonna debunk this whole thing. He admits, let me say something, guys. A devil never fully admits. A devil never fully admits. A devil will say, yeah, I just a little bit. Yeah, I lied a little. It was a white lie. You know, lying is all about duration and intent, right? So a devil will never fully admit. So what he's going to say is, yeah, we only had a 12% involvement in the TAST bondage, but that's a lie. He's going to be found out to be a liar. And then this devil, this small hat, this fraud says the only way people leave. He says the only reason the world is saying that they had some involvement in our bondage is because of Minister Farrakhan. I have books from before Minister Farrakhan's 1991 book. One second. One second. When was this book published? Right? A History of the Small Hats. A History of the 1948ers by Paul Johnson, a well-known author and historian. When was this published? This was published in 1987. 1987. And guess what? He's quoting from a source earlier than that. So in this book from 1987, we're going to read some of it in a second here. He talks about the 1948ers played a major role in the bondage of our people, the TAST, right? He's quoting from another sources all through here. He's quoting from sources all through here. And we're going to get some of his sources that he quotes. It goes back before the Honorable Minister Farrakhan. It really goes back to their Talmud. Their Talmud says you could enslave Africans. So no wonder why they had such a role, a pivotal role in the TAST. Tawada Malkael, hopefully I'm saying that right, Brother Asher, for the super chat donation. Really appreciate you. Now, let's play some of this lying video, and then I'm about to get into some undeniable sources so that you guys can debunk these liars as well. All right. So before I do though, let me just say fair use. This is going to be our thoughts and comments on this content. Fair use. This is going to be our thoughts and comments on this content. So this is from Unpacked. If you guys are familiar, he did a video a few months ago. Whew. Excuse me. These allergies kicking in. Anyway, look at this. Debunking. Did the small hats run the TAST? Did the small hats run the TAST? So let's check this out. I'm going to slow it down just a little bit for YouTube purposes.
You've heard the anti-Semitic tropes. Jews run the banks.
Now, starting off, he said it's anti-small hat to say the small hats run the banks. Ain't that crazy? What are you guys so afraid of that even if somebody says you guys are majorly successful and have a grasp on and to shape the global narrative, how is that anti? What are you trying to hide and keep a secret? You don't have to be a Hebrew Israelite to follow the bread trail of how the Federal Reserve note started, of who funded both sides of the war, of the Illuminati and secret society. You don't need to be a Hebrew Israelite or to have any problem with you guys to research that and track and trace. Come on now, you know you're hiding something when you say we're gonna basically call it a crime when somebody says, nigga, we got the bag. What? Nobody's like that. Elon Musk ain't like that. Jeff Bezos ain't like that. When people talk about how big their bag is, they don't say, oh, it's anti-Bezos, it's anti-Elon.
Space lasers. Jews pull the strings that make world leaders dance.
They pull the strings and make world leaders dance. So he's basically mocking people that say how much the small hats are in control. Well, just look at Zelensky. What the hell is that? What the hell is a small hat president in Ukraine for? We know the influence the small hats have over world leaders. Just think about it. This guy has to be, of course, he's a small hat, but either you're knowingly lying or you're just stupid. I mean, if anybody speaks out about Africans, do they get canceled? If anybody speaks out against East Indians, do they get canceled? If anybody and it could be anybody of high stature, speak out against Chinese people, do they get canceled? If they speak out against Latinos, do they get canceled? Native Americans, do they get canceled? They speak out against Arabs, do they get canceled? Who's the one people that you can speak out against and you will get canceled no matter who you are? So yes, who runs the global narrative?
Have you heard that Jews controlled the slave trade? This libelous claim began circulating in 1991.
See that? Then, so he said, have you heard that the small hats controlled 80% of the TAST? For those who are just coming in and you don't know what the TAST is, it's us being in chains. That's what I'm going to say. Us being in shackles and chains, picking cotton. I can't say certain words due to algorithm purposes. Now, I can't say to what percent, but I can say who was the first and who had a major role. You're trying to minimize it and downplay it in this video. He says like 6 to 12%. That's what he says. He's a liar. Now, he's saying this claim first began in 1991 with who? Watch.
Trade. This libelous claim began circulating in 1991 when an extremist organization known as the Nation of Islam claimed to have gathered
Once again, he's lying. Circulated in 1991, huh? We can go back to your guys' Talmud, 1,500 years ago. What do you say about Africans in here? Now, this is proving a point, but I'm going to speed up to what happened in the 1600s. I'm going to speed up to that. I don't feel like finding this and reading it, though. But we've read this before in the Talmud so many times where they say that Africans are basically born to be put in chains. Now, I believe that's their justifiable reason of having a major role in the TAST and putting us in chains. Now, white supremacy is so real. The Water Brother Alam, I greatly appreciate you for the super chat. White supremacy is so real that he's trying to lie. That's why I say either he's a liar or he's stupid. He's trying to lie and say the Honorable Minister Farrakhan is the one who first started perpetuating the lie that they had a major role in our captivity. But he's not going to condemn Paul Johnson, his fellow Edomite, right? This book is from 1987, as we qualified already, right? And look what he says. Look what he says. We always bring this out on page 249. On page 249, this is what he says in the second paragraph. That being so, the small hats were prepared to take advantage of the growth in the world economy. How? Which marked the 16th century. Well, what was going on in the 16th century that was booming in the earth, us being sold, and our brothers as well being sold as well, the indigenous people of the Americas. Hibiscus. Indeed, in view of their exclusion from the Spanish Peninsula and their treatment in Reformation and Counter-Reformation Europe, they had no alternative but to push the diaspora further and seek new outlets for their business skills. Watch this. To the west, Columbus's voyages were not the only ones which had small hats, right? Expelled small hats went to the Americas as the earliest traders. They set up factories in St. Thomas. For instance, they became the first large-scale plantation owners. Your fellow white man is propagating this in 1987, but you're going to condemn Minister Farrakhan for propagating the same sentiments and irrefutable evidence and information in 1991. That's white supremacy, of course. Now, in a second, we're going to get the source that Paul Johnson is quoting from. Let me play a little bit more of this.
Evidence that Jews ran the slave trade in the Americas. Most recently, the claim reared its ugly head when NBA star Kyrie Irving promoted the film Hebrews to Negroes.
He's still mad at everybody's still mad at Kyrie. Everybody is still mad at Kyrie.
Which makes some pretty outlandish allegations about the Jewish role in the slave trade. So let's ask the uncomfortable question. What role did Jews play in the transatlantic slave trade?
Uh-oh, he's about to bring it out. What role did they play? Well, one thing we know is everybody who did play a role had made a fortune. And guess what? You can say you're sorry. You can say it wasn't 80%. It was only 10%. You still never gave reparations. And they're the good people. Okay.
And airy mansions and oak forests dripping with Spanish moss. But its wealth was built on the backs of over 4 million enslaved people.
So he's talking about how the South, the southern states of America are so beautiful, but you know it was built on the backs of slaves. 4 million, the books are cooked. That's a low number.
Pick and process the cotton and tobacco that dominated the South's economy. And let's not forget that even most Northerners indirectly benefited from the economy of forced labor in the South. Slavery was baked into the financial and social climate. Nearly 1/3 of all Southern families owned enslaved Africans. If you were a rich white Southerner who could afford to own slaves, you likely did. And that included the small Jewish community of the 19th century American South.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Just fucking say it. I'm sorry, excuse my language. So he skipped past the 1600s. No, he skipped past the 1400s, the 1500s, the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s, and just said, yeah, there was this small 1948 family in the early 1900s that had it. This is why the Bible says we need a savior. Nobody cares about what happened to us. Nobody's going to give us a goddamn Chinese nickel about it. Nobody came to our rescue. Nobody's going to give us a goddamn thing. This is why we are the ones who actually need a savior and help from on high. Now, mind you, in this book, it says that these people got expelled from Spain, then came over here and had the first plantations and took us into captivity. But I thought the prophecy says these nations wouldn't let us go. This is what I want to know. How are real Israelites getting kicked out of any place when they're supposed to be in that place as slaves in captivity, and your oppressor's not supposed to let you go? Jeremiah 50:33. Thus saith the Lord, the children of Israel and Judah, both kingdoms, were oppressed together at the same time, and all that took them captives held them fast and refused to let them go. How are you guys going everywhere, getting booted out? That's 100% contrary to God's word. Thus saith the Lord. You going everywhere getting expelled, that's not an Israelite then. First of all, you would have to be there in slavery to be an Israelite. Then you're not going anywhere. They're not letting you go. excuse my language, y'all. It's just the lies. He skipped past 400 years. His fellow Edomite said they were the first in the 16th century to be the large-scale plantation owners. And we're going to get the source he's quoting from.
Jews owning slaves? We are talking about the same community that celebrates their own liberation from slavery every Passover, right?
Oh my goodness, man. This is why I say, man, there's no God. If what he's saying is true, there just is no God. We're doomed. Evolution is real. If what he's saying is true. We evolved from monkeys. If what he's saying is actual and factual.
Nation that gave the world the classic line,
"Let my people go."
it's a strange and brutal irony, but it's true. Sure, census.
So he said it's true. He said it's true that they did have an involvement. But what was their involvement? What percentage? All right, I'm live right now. What's up? You leaving? You leaving? You don't want to stay?
Yeah.
You don't want to stay here?
I can't.
Why?
I'm going to my mom's.
You coming back Friday? Okay.
Hi,
What's up?
Suggests that Jews enslaved far fewer folks than your average white Christian Southerner.
So he's saying that they enslaved far fewer folks than your average white Christian Southerner. You see the differentiation? It's all the same. One race of people, Caucasians, enslaving God's actual chosen people. Oh, going back to his conspiracy, him trying to say we're conspiracy. This is why I had this pulled up. This right here is from 2013. I'm sure right now it's probably all green. It's probably all green. And the red are the small hats. He said it's a conspiracy when you say they run everything. But we have this, and it's probably all red now. All of these in the red are presidents, CEOs, founders, owners, vice presidents, and chairmen of all the major networks, broadcast companies, businesses in the world. In the world. So you tell me who shaped the global narrative and controlled the economy as well. All these in the red are 1948ers. While he trying to say, oh, everybody's saying we did this, we do that. It's anti-small hat. It's true. So that's what they want to say. They want to say it wasn't the Christian, it was the Christian white folks that did that, not the small hat white folks. It was the Christian white folks that did that. The 1948 white folk ain't have that much role in it. So give them a break. No, an accomplice is still an accomplice. A co-defendant is still a co-defendant. A crimey is still a crimey. No matter what the degree of involvement. And furthermore, God judges nations. So being that you guys are all one so-called race, you have to get judged together. Oh, yeah, the small hat Edomites only had 8%, but the European Edomite had 92%. Edomite to Edomite.
I mean, roughly 12,000 Southerners enslaved more than 50 people. Want to guess how many of that number were Jews? 20. So
20. Okay, we're going to see.
And the Jews had some kind of monopoly on slaveholding is, well, pretty ridiculous. And yet the fact remains that some Jews did.
We're not saying that a monopoly. We're just talking about major involvement, the first to do it. This Edomite said you guys were the first to have plantations over here, or at least in the islands. So it says that they did enslave, kidnapped, it's calling us Africans.
Slave kidnapped Africans. The stats are even starker when you head over to the Caribbean and South America, where Jews were just as likely as their non-Jewish neighbors to own an enslaved person. It's an uncomfortable legacy to grapple with, to be sure.
It's an uncomfortable legacy to grapple with. Why? I thought in the Talmud it says, now I gotta read it. Why is it uncomfortable when in the Talmud you say that you guys can enslave Africans? It's okay, right? Watch this. Here we go. So look at this. This is a story in the Talmud where it says, right. Now look at this. It says, a wise man says that rabbis Gabiah ben Pasisa, when the children of Canaan accused the Israelites of stealing their land, because remember, God told us to take their land. The land of Canaan is ours, as it is written. The land of Canaan and its boundaries belong to the Canaanites. And they demanded restitution, but Gabiah argued the case before the ruler. Look what he said. Gabiah said to the Africans, you show your proof from the Pentateuch, and I'll refute it with the Pentateuch. Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. To whom does the property of a slave belong? To his master. So here in the Talmud, it says that Africans cannot have any property of a slave belongs to his master. This is the thought, the racism that is permeating all throughout the small hat literature that they hold to be authority in God's word. So why is it uncomfortable when that's what your Talmud says? And even in other parts of the Talmud, it says it's a crime to liberate an African slave. If an African slave wants to be liberated, you cannot help him be liberated. Matter of fact, let's get that. Canaanites or Hamites? What color do you think Canaanites are? Let me get that though. I want to get another one. I want to get another text out of the Mishnah, right? So if you look at Gittin 38b Talmud, right? It says your slave has to be your slave forever. That's what it says, right? But that's what Leviticus 25 says. But he asked, Here we go. The sages interpret the verse as follows: of a man, these are his Canaanite slaves and his maid servants. This demonstrates that one may consecrate his slaves as they are not emancipated as a result. But if you read this whole thing, I'm not going to read it all right now. It is forbidden to liberate a Canaanite slave or an African slave, according to Talmudic literature. But he's trying to say it's so uncomfortable to talk about. He's a liar. They don't feel like that. That's face value.
Enslaved
Is she here?
It's an uncomfortable legacy to grapple with.
Why are you hiding them chips?
But it wasn't an unusual one. Jews were not disproportionately more likely to own enslaved people, and they certainly were not more likely to.
Tell her to stop doing that. Just throw it away. And tell her don't be ringing my doorbell. This guy. Where's your beard at? Don't the Hashem say wear a beard?
To be sure. But it wasn't an unusual one. Jews were not disproportionately more likely to own enslaved people, and they certainly were not more likely to, how does the Nation of Islam say it, control the entire slave trade? Yeah, no. Where does this lie even come from? Well, I don't want to say anything too controversial here, but I think it's safe to say that Jews living in 18th century Europe weren't doing too great.
So he's saying that eighteenth century small hats in Europe weren't doing too great. But we're going to read, we already read that in the book, The History of the Small Hats right here, that they had great financial skills. I mean, how do you get all the way to the Americas to start plantations if you didn't have any money, if you weren't doing wealthy and successful? So he's saying they weren't doing well in Europe, so they had to come over here and put your black asses in captivity. That's basically what he's saying. But it was only a little bit of them.
But I think it's safe to say that Jews living in 18th century Europe weren't doing too great. Centuries of restrictive anti-Semitic legislation left them with few options for making a living. Barred from owning land in many professions.
Hold on. Tribe of Issachar is saying somebody needs to get blocked. Why does anybody need to get blocked? What did he say wrong? I never said Canaanites are black people in America.
Jews turned to the few trades they were allowed to practice: commerce, supply, trade, manufacturing, and finance. Behold the origin of the old anti-Semitic stereotype that Jews are good with money or control the economy. Now, Portugal and the Netherlands were once home to two of Europe's large Jewish communities. And what kind of trade were Portugal and the Netherlands doing in the 18th century? You guessed it, importing and exporting human beings. Since Portuguese and Dutch Jews were traders and merchants and businessmen, some made their living trading enslaved people. While a few were prominent slave traders, most found themselves in minor roles as middlemen, brokering arrangements for enslaved people, among other commercial goods. Others became minority investors in much larger slavery-based businesses. Meanwhile, Jews in the Caribbean relied on the trade of European goods, food products, and diamonds, since they already had networks for those types of merchandise. A tiny number owned slaving vessels or resold enslaved people. In terms of Dutch international trade,
so basically he's saying Yagal, what are you talking about? Yagal, are you Northern Kingdom? Yes or no? Are you Northern Kingdom? Yay or nay? There's no way around the fact that you had an involvement. He's trying to minimize it. Okay, then I'm confused about your question. Oh, okay. I'm confused about your question. Salakia. He's scoffing and been scoffing. I don't understand why he's scoffing. Either way, though, it's such a reality about their role in our captivity, in the TAST, right? Of them putting us in chains. It's so obvious. This is the age of information. And so now they want to just downplay it and say, well, we only had 12% of a role in it. We're going to debunk that.
Jews were already disproportionately represented. And unfortunately, the number of Jews involved in the slave trade reflects this. It's estimated that Jews were responsible for 6 to 10% of Dutch slave trade to the Americas. As a Jew, I'm embarrassed by such a high number.
Why are you so embarrassed? The Talmud says you can enslave them forever if they're not small hats. Right? You guys don't believe in the Bible. Matter of fact, the Bible says if they're non-Israelites, you can have them as slaves forever. You guys don't believe in the Torah, and you guys don't believe in your own Talmud that says that same thing. What is the purpose of saying you're a small hat if you don't stand on what's supposed to be your text? Leviticus 25 and 46. You can have them, the heathen that are round about you, as bondmen and bondwomen forever, and rule over them with rigor. What's the point of you even saying you're the people if you're not going to stand on what the text says?
But the Dutch slave trade only accounted for roughly 6% of a trade dominated by the British and Portuguese.
So I think what he's trying to say here is that they were involved in the Dutch part of the TAST.
In terms of British involvement in the slave trade, scholars estimate that roughly a dozen Jews participated in some aspect of the transatlantic slave trade. A dozen. Put it all together, and it's still nowhere near what anti-Semites are claiming. And by the 19th century, the already minor Jewish share of the triangular trade had all but disappeared. As a descendant of enslaved peoples in the Caribbean, I'm not here to downplay the role of any group or individual. Slavery and the vicious brutality of the transatlantic slave trade was evil, period. Just because it was widely accepted in the culture of the time doesn't make it any less wrong. And the fact that Jews were only a fraction of a percentage of those responsible for bringing enslaved people to the Americas doesn't make it any better for the generations of lives destroyed by this atrocity. But there's a reason we're not here today talking about the Catholic or Arab or West African role in the slave trade. And no, it's not because they didn't play a role. The claim that Jews played a leading role in the slave trade is to play into the same old trope that anti-Semites have been spewing for centuries, that Jews are part of some conspiracy to run the world, that Jews wield power wildly disproportionate to their population.
Oh, man.
Money-hungry monsters who profit off of others' suffering. It's easy to manipulate facts to form a certain narrative, to cherry pick data, pluck statistics out of context, and weave it all into some warped story about Jewish evil. Half-truths are powerful precisely because of the tiny kernel of truth buried within.
6% of 4 million is a lot of people.
But this isn't even
6% of 12 million is a lot of people. You're done, my boy.
half the truth. It's a bald-faced lie. Did some Jews own enslaved people? Yes. Did some Jews benefit from the labor of enslaved people? Yes. Did some Jews work trading in human beings? Yes. Does any of that mean that Jews controlled the slave trade? That they benefited disproportionately from buying and selling their fellow human beings? That they were primarily responsible for hundreds of years of misery and suffering and theft? Absolutely not. That is what we call a lie. One that drives hatred of a tiny minority.
He must be a paid agent. He must be a paid agent.
And pits two persecuted groups against one another. It's up to us to stare the facts in the face and to tear down the hateful lies that have been built.
Watch this. Where's my book at? Okay, now watch this. Remember, y'all, he tried to say Minister Farrakhan in 1991 was the first one to say that they had an involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, right? Look at that. It's still 100. No, even if you try to say only 6%, 6 to 10%, that's still hundreds and thousands of people. Bro, stop. Now, this is a book called The Jews in Modern Capitalism. Remember, we just read a history of the Jews. We just read an excerpt out of the book from Paul Johnson, A History of the Jews, from 1987, where he said they were the first large-scale plantation owners. He's quoting from this book right here. He's quoting from this source. Paul Johnson is quoting from this source, The Jews in Modern Capitalism. And then this source is quoting another German source, I believe. Now watch this. Watch this though. Right? Now this book came out in 1913. 1913. Right? Watch this though. 1913. We're going to start at page 29. Look at page 29, right? Remember, he said the only reason this guy tried to lie and say the only reason that they got into the slave trade in the 1900s is because they were doing bad in the 1800s. He's a liar. This source is saying they started in the 16th century. Now let's read this. Let's see how bad they were doing and if there was only a little bit of them involved. So it says, we know that the governor of the company who, if he did not actually establish the power of Holland and Hava, certainly contributed most strength to it, was called Coin. Furthermore, a glance at the portraits of the governor's Dutch colonies, right? So remember, he talked about how the small hats were doing trading human beings with the Dutch and the Dutch's involvement in the triangular trade, right? Dutch colonies would make it appear that this Cohen is not only the Jew among them, Jews were also directors of the company. They were just middlemen. They were just middlemen. Jews were also directors of the company. In short, no colonial enterprise was complete without them. So even if they were Christian whites, no colonial company or enterprise was complete without a few small hats at the top of it, just like today. Right? It is yet unknown to what extent the small hats shared in the growth of the economic life in India after the English became masters there. So they were even in India colonizing. We have, however, fairly full information as to the participation of the small hats in the funding of English colonies in South Africa and Australia. Come on, man. I thought everywhere you go, you were cursed. That's what Hashem's word says. Not everywhere you go, you help colonize, you get up to the top spots in the enterprises, and then make your fortune off of slave trade and business skills and all of that. There is no doubt that in these regions, more particularly in the Cape Colony, well nigh all economic development was due to the small hats. In the 20s, 30s of the 19th century, Benjamin Norton and Simon Marx came to South Africa, and the industrial awakening of almost the whole interior of Cape Colony was their work. Julius Massenthal and his brothers, Adolf and James, established the trade in wool, skins, and mohair. Aaron and Daniel DePaz monopolized the whaling industry, or the walling industry. Joel Myers commenced ostrich farming. Lillian Field of Hopetown bought the first diamonds. Remember, in that video, he said something about diamonds. Similar leading positions were occupied. Similar leading positions were occupied by the small hats in other South African colonies, particularly in Transvaal, where it is said that today 25 of the 50,000 Jews of South Africa are settled. So 25,000 of them, they're there at this time. It is the same story in Australia, where the first wholesale trader of Montefiore was Montefiore, Salakia. It would seem to be no exaggeration, therefore, that a large proportion of the English colony shipping trade was for a considerable time in the hands of the small hats. But the real sphere of the small hat influence in colonialism settlements, especially in the early capitalistic period, was in the Western Hemisphere. All right, now let's get to where, see, he left out, y'all. He left out their involvement in the slavery of other people outside of us and the colonizing of other people outside of us. He left that out, but it's okay. I just wanted to mention that in India and South Africa, and there's many more places when you read this book. Now, check this out about us over here in the video that he just did, right? America in all its borders is a land of the small hats. So at this time in 1913, this is when it was published, but this is information that he's pulling from 300 to 400 years ago, sources from that time. Why is he saying America and all its border is the land of the small hats, even though it's not populated by all small hats? You don't have to be the majority to own the world. You don't have to be the majority to run the world. All you need is the money and influence. All you need to do is to make the world leaders dance. Watch what he says, though. That is the result to which a study of the sources must inevitably lead, and it is pregnant with meaning. From the first day of its discovery, America has had a strong influence on the economic life of Europe and the whole of its civilization. Why? Because Europe didn't have any resources. So what did they do? This is what's called the doctrine of discovery. We're running out of resources. We're running out of the money. We're getting sick, all these diseases and plagues. We got to go conquer other lands. We got to exploit them for their natural minerals and resources and their free slave labor. This is how America sustained Europe to this day. And therefore, the part which the small hats have played in the building up of the American world is of supreme import as an element in modern development. That is why I shall dwell on this theme a little more fully, even at the risk of wearying the reader. The very discovery of America is most intimately bound up with the small hats in an extraordinary fashion. It is through the New World came in. It is as though the New World came into the horizon by their aid and for them alone. Why? You go, bro, you're blocked from the channel. You're blocked from the channel. If you had a question about something completely off the goddamn topic, you could have messaged me instantly. You message me all the time about anything else. You then I'm gonna stop this whole lesson to ask your question that has nothing to do with the topic. If you don't like what we teach, if your doctrine is changing, if you're bugging out, go do it on your own, brother. Shalom. Anyway, so what he's going to elaborate and expound on, he's going to say they were getting expelled from all these places, and so they needed America. This was their agenda. They were getting expelled for all these places, so they needed America for them all to dwell in without, so this could be a place where they wouldn't get expelled from. This is what he's trying to convey here. Right? New World for them alone, right? So it says the New World came into the horizon by their aid. This guy is a liar, and he's not being sincere about the sources. Not the author of this book. I'm talking about the video we just watched. Right? So it says America came into existence by their aid. By whose aid? The 1948ers, the small hats. What does he mean by that? That they paid for Columbus's voyage to get here. Who knew that? And then what did that start, everybody? The TAST, the triangular trade. Us going into bondage and the indigenous people in this place going into bondage. So that guy is a liar. Either he don't know the facts or he's just stupid. Or a liar or wicked. I think he's all the above without having to pick one. So watch this though. It is in this light, hold on. For them alone, right? As though Columbus and the rest were but managing directors for Israel. Look at that. This is what it says. They say that Columbus he wasn't saying, let me go be great and find other places so I can be this historical figure. It was the small hats influencing him and aiding him and paying the bread for him to go and get this place. How did they know it? Of course, we believe Arsareth in 2nd Ezra 13. And which is going to elaborate more on. It says, it is in this light that the small hats, proud of their past, now regard the story of that discovery as set forth in the latest researches. So he has a source where it's saying that the small hats are proud of the fact that they aided Columbus over here and what came with what happened as he got here. These would seem to show that it was the scientific knowledge of 1948er scholars which so perfected the art of navigation that voyages across the ocean became at all possible. Now he's attributing knowing how to navigate over here to the New World to the small hats. Watch what he says. Abraham Zacuto, professor of mathematics and astronomy at the University of Salamanca. I thought the Israelites were supposed to be everywhere in captivity under the curses, not navigating mathematicians and professors finding the new world and also aiding in the funding to get there. Completed his astronomical tables and diagrams of the Almanac Perpetuum in 1473. So he's telling you, on the basis of these tables, two other Jews, Jose Vacuo, who was court astronomer and physician to John II of Portugal, and one Moses the mathematician, in collaboration with two Christian scholars, discovered the nautical astrolabe, an instrument by which it became possible to measure from the altitude of the sun and the distance of a ship from the equator. So he's saying that these, why the hell is that doing that? He's saying that this Columbus's trip was all possible by the aiding financially of the small hat 1948ers and their mathematicians, astronomers, physicians, and instruments. Jose further translated the almanac of his master in Latin and Spanish. The scientific facts which prepared the way for the voyage of Columbus were thus supplied by the small hats. Damn, this dude is a liar. So you mean to tell me they provided and funded the science, the money for him to get here, and so you want to say the Honorable Minister Farrakhan is lying in his book that he wrote in 1991, but this is a book from 1913 that he's grabbing sources from centuries earlier, where it's stating that they did aid everything. And what else did they aid when they got here? The genocide of the indigenous people, the enslavement of the indigenous people in over here, and then the bringing of the Southern Kingdom, the so-called Negro tribes over here to the Americas to serve in that captivity. So even if Minister Farrakhan said they were responsible for 80% of the captivity, we could 78%. We can see why, according to these sources. This would have never happened if they didn't aid Columbus. This would have never happened if they wouldn't have aided him financially and scientifically. The money, which was equally necessary, came from the same quarter. Who? The small hats. At any rate, as regards his first two voyages. Who was his first two voyages aided by? Well, this source is telling us the small hats. For the first voyage, Columbus obtained a loan from Luis de Santangel, who was of the King's Council. And it was to Santangel, that patriot of the expedition, and to Gabriel Senaheg, a Marrano. What is a Marrano? Not a Moreno, dark person. A Marrano is a crypto Jew. What is a crypto Jew? One who had to hide that he was a Jew during their expulsions of Europe. He was the treasurer of Aragon. The first two letters of Columbus were addressed. Columbus is writing to this guy who's a crypto Jew, who's the treasurer. This is how he's going to get the bread. Right? The second voyage was also undertaken with the aid of Jewish money. How? This time, certainly not voluntarily. So, or not voluntarily contributed. So the first time they knew what they were doing, they gave him the bread. The second time, Spain had basically stole their money. But this is how we know they weren't over there under curses. They were over there doing well. Because how did Spain steal enough money from you to fund Columbus's next voyage? You shouldn't have had no bread. I thought you was over there doing down bad. I thought you was over there dicking the dirt down bad. Right? The second voyage was also undertaken with the aid of Jewish money, this time certainly not voluntarily contributed. On their expulsion from Spain in 1492, the Small Hats were compelled to leave much treasure behind. This was seized by Ferdinand for the state of Exchequer. And with a portion of it, Columbus was financed. But more than that, a number of Small Hats were among the companions of Columbus. And the first European to set foot on American soil was a Jew. Now, some people try to say that this was an Israelite. Me personally, I don't believe that this was an Israelite, a true Israelite at all. In a lot of times too, I think this is I think there's multiple reasons why that there were more than just one Jew, because there was a company of Jews, a number of Jews, not just Louis de Torres, a number of Jews were among the companions of Columbus, right? So why though? Well, this source is telling you that, you know, they aided it. They aided the voyage. They supplied the voyage. They had the astronomers and mathematicians to get here. And also because they wanted to take this land for themselves because they were getting kicked out of everywhere. Now, Hebrew Israelites will say this, and I believe this is part of it as well. Hebrew Israelites will say there was a Hebrew interpreter on, there were Hebrews, people that spoke Hebrew on the ships because they knew the people here were Hebrew. I believe that too, though. I believe that they knew how to get here from 2nd Ezra 13, just like the movie 1492 says. So I believe those are both true, that, you know, they had to come with, they had to know Hebrew, of course, because they're converts, and they had to speak to the people here knowing that they're Hebrew, assuming that they still had traces of the language here, the indigenous people, but also because they were aiding it, funding it, the science for it, and trying to claim the land for themselves, right? So the latest research would have us to believe that the first person to set foot on American soil was a Jew, Louis de Torres. But what caps all, Columbus himself is claimed to have been a Jew. So this guy is trying to sit up here and lie, this individual right here, right? And trying to say, no, the Small Hats only had 6% involvement. Well, the first one to come over here and start killing shit and taking slaves was Columbus. So it says, Columbus himself is claimed to have been a Jew. Now, this is why I like this author here, because he's pretty fair. Look what he says. I give this piece of information for what it is worth without guaranteeing its accuracy. But he's going to tell you why he's drawing this conclusion that Christopher Columbus was a Small Hat. Look what it says. At a meeting of the Geographical Society of Madrid, Don Celso Garcia and de la Riera, a scholar famous for his researches on Columbus, read a paper in which he stated that Cristobal Colon was a Spaniard who on his mother's side was of Jewish descent. So according to Judaism, what they believe it's of your mother, well, he would be a Jew, Columbus. He showed by reference to documents in the town of Pontevedra in the province of Galicia that the family of Colon lived there between 1428 and 1528, and that the Christian names found among them were the same as those prevalent among the relatives of the Spanish admiral. These Colons and the Fortosa family intermarried. The latter were undoubtedly small hats, or they had only recently been converted, and Cristobal's mother was called Susanna Fontarosa. When disorders broke out in the province of Galicia, the parents of discovered American migrated from Spain to Italy. These facts were substantiated by Don. All right, and he is strengthened in his belief by the distinct echoes of Hebrew literature found in the writings of Columbus. I didn't know that. I did not know that. No, but somebody said by mother's side came out about the late 1800s. Excuse me? And the Talmud from 300 to 500 AD states that you're a Jew by your mother. So Don Celso, a studier and researcher of Columbus, says he found Hebrew literature in the writings of Columbus. And also because the oldest portrait show him to have had a Jewish face. Okay. An Edomite face. Okay. Scarcely were the doors of the New World open to Europeans, then crowds of. Okay, here we go. Now watch this. Scarcely were the doors of the New World open to Europeans, then crowds of Jews came swarming in. So he's saying that they started coming more than, the Christian Europeans. We have already seen that the discovery of America took place in the year in which the Jews of Spain became homeless, that the last years of the 15th century and the early years of the 16th were a period in which millions of Jews were forced to become wanderers, when European Jewry was like an antheap into which a stick had been thrust. So they're saying that the result of them getting expelled from these European countries during the European Reformation is why they aided Columbus to come over here and get this land so that they can dwell here. Interesting. Now watch this though. Right? Little wonder, therefore, that a great part of this heat betook itself in the New World. The New World, what? The Americas, where the future seemed so bright. For who? Not for God's chosen people. Not for God's chosen people. The first industrial establishments in America were those of the small hats. Industrial? Wait, what? What was industrial at the time of the 16th century? Oh, human bondage? Yes. Already in the year 1492, Portuguese small hats settled in St. Thomas, where they were the first plantation owners on a large scale. You guys got hell to pay. Hell to pay. They set up many sugar factories and gave employment to nearly 3,000 Negroes. You hear how he's wording it? And this is how you know that he's being fair here. He doesn't not like the small hats. He's calling it employment. Well, here's how you debunk that it's talking about working at a goddamn Jack in the Box. How did the Negroes get there? Oh, by the TAST, cargo ships. So this wasn't, hey, come work, and these are slaves in bondage here, right? So the small hats, the 1948ers, they gave employment or enslaved, let's just call it what it is, 3,000 Israelites, true Israelites. And as far as small hat immigration to South America, hold on. Almost as soon as it was discovered, the stream was so great that Queen Joanne in 1511 thought it necessary to make measures to stem it. So Queen Joanne, I think this is a Portuguese bitch, right? Excuse my language, but she's down there enslaving and oppressing the Southern Kingdom and Northern Kingdom in South America, because they were bringing a lot of the slaves from West Africa to South America and enslaving the indigenous people who were already in South America. So she's a bitch. But look what she says. She says, so many small hats, so many 1948ers were trying to get into South America in 1511 that she tried to ban them. He talking about it wasn't even a lot of small hats here. So how could they have a major role in the trans situation? Right? She said, no, hell no. Let's get these rats out of here. And that's the thing. You got all this money, and everywhere you go, people just don't like you. You got business skills. You got all this money. You're not a slave there. You're not in servitude there. And people just don't like you. Why? What do you guys do to people, to even your fellow Edomites, that makes them not like you and want to destroy you? I know what you do. Now look at this, right? So she tried to, it was so many of them coming to South America in 1511 that she said she wanted to stem it. She wanted to ban them. But her efforts have been without avail, for the number of small hats increased. And finally, on May 21st, 1577, the law forbidding, the small hats to immigrate to the Spanish colonies were formally repealed. In order to do full justice to the unceasing activity of the small hats in South America as founders of colonial commerce and industry, it would be advisable to glance at the fortunes of one or two colonies. So now he's going back to how they colonized South Africa, and we know about the apartheid down there as well. Right? Now watch this. Okay, here we go. The history of the remember, he tried to lie. He tried to lie and say they weren't doing so well. That's why they picked your black ass up and put you in chains. but it was wrong, and I'm offended by it. He's a liar. Watch this. They were doing well enough to aid Columbus, have mathematicians, scientists, and astronomers to get here. And then it said they had treasures. They wanted more. Right? So it says the history of the small hats in the American colonies, and therefore the history of the colonies themselves falls into two periods, separated by the expulsions of the small hats from the expulsion from the small hats in Brazil in 1654. Right? They wanted them out of Brazil. We have already mentioned the establishment of the sugar industry in St. Thomas by the Jews in 1492. Interesting. Why is this interesting, everybody? Because we were starting to get kidnapped by the Portuguese in 1441 by Prince Henry of Portugal. Where was he taking us? He was taking us to Portugal and Spain, but they also were colonizing the islands over here as well. So this is how you get those 3,000 Negroes who were on the islands of St. Thomas, who the small hats enslaved and put them on the sugarcane plantations. By the year 1550, this industry had reached the height of its development on the island. There were 60 plantations with sugar mills and refineries producing annually, as may be seen from the 10th part paid to the king, 150 arubas of sugar. So they were getting so much money off of slave labor that they were able to pay their tithes, 10% tithes to the king of Portugal, I believe, I believe it was King of Portugal or the King of Spain, or it might have been the King of England. I'm not sure who had St. Thomas around 1550. Let's see. Okay, so it's not saying it. So it would have to be the King of Portugal. Yeah, I think it was the King of Portugal, right? So nobody blocked you, Toby. I hate when people say, you blocked me. I see your comment. But maybe you should be blocked. What'd you do? So they had so much money. This is why I say they made their fortune off of us, off of free labor, right? That they were able to pay 10% tithes to the King of Portugal, 150 arobis of sugar. Now, we looked that up last time. Oh, YouTube blocked you. Oh, okay. We looked that up last time. I forgot what it was, and I don't feel like doing it now. But it's barrels on barrels on barrels on barrels of sugar. From St. Thomas, or possibly from Madeira, where they had for so long engaged in the sugar trade, the Jews transplanted the industry to Brazil. So they were getting so much money from the having us on them fields in St. Thomas that they got another plantation industry in Brazil. Brazil thus entered on its first period of prosperity. Now, what was happening in 1550 in Brazil? We know. In those early years, the colony was populated almost entirely by small hats and criminals. This is what it says. 2 shiploads of them being brought thither annually from Portugal. The small hats quickly became the dominant class. A not inconsiderable number of the wealthiest Brazilian traders were new Christians. So the Christians were the minority, and they weren't making the most money off the transatlantic slave trade during this time. Guess who was? The small hats, the 1948ers. This is good right here. Look at this. The first governor general was of Jewish origin. Wait a second. That should blow your mind. These guys are trying to say that they weren't involved in this. They didn't have a major role in this. They weren't there. Only a little bit of them were here. But the first governor of Brazil, or was that Portugal? It says the first governor general was of Jewish origin. And he it was who brought order into the government of the colony. Oh, I think he's going to say that. I think they're going to say that he freed them slaves down there in South America, because they're good Jewish folk. Them is some good Jewish folk. So I think it's going to say he freed them people down there when he became governor general. It is not too much to say that Portugal's new possessions really began to thrive only after Thomas de Sousa, a man of exceptional ability, was sent out in 1549 to take matters in his hand. Nevertheless, the colony did not reach the zenith of its prosperity until after the influx of rich small hats from Holland, consequent on the Dutch entering into possession in 1642. In that very year, a number of American Jews combined to establish a colony in Brazil, and no less than 600 influential Dutch Jews joined them. Up to about the middle of the 17th century, all the large sugar plantations belonged to the Jews. Damn. And contemporary travelers report as to their many-sided activities and their wealth. How they get their wealth during this time. Oh, it says it, the plantations. Well, who was working the plantations? Oh, it said it earlier, the Negroes. Thus, Nieuwhof, who traveled in Brazil from 1640 to 1649, says of them, he's going to talk about the small hats, among the free inhabitants of Brazil that were not in the Dutch West India company's service, the small hats were the most considerable in number, who had transplanted themselves there from Holland. They had a vast traffic beyond the rest. Business. That's what the word traffic means, business. Right? They had better business than everybody else. They purchased sugar mills and built stately houses in the Recife. They were all traders, which would have been of great consequence to the Dutch Brazil, had kept themselves within the due bounds of traffic. Similarly, we read in F. Perriard's Travels, the profits they make after being 9 or 10 years in those lands are marvelous. They all come back rich. And you wonder why we say every one of them is rich. And the ones that aren't rich, they're trying to get rid of their white privilege and be vagrants and migrants and skateboarders and fentanyl poppers. This is just a fact. They made their fortune off of having us in chains. This is a major part, a major role in the TAST. They all come over here and get rich in 10 years, nigga. the profits they make after being 9 or 10 years, and those lands are marvelous, they all come back rich. Why? It just told you, plantations. The predominance of small hat influence in plantation development outlasted the episode of the Dutch rule in Brazil. So they outlasted the Dutch rule and continued despite the expulsion of 1654. They got kicked out of Brazil in 1654. Down to the first half of the 17th century, on one occasion, when a number of the most influential merchants of Rio de Janeiro fell into the hands of the Holy Office of the Inquisition, the work on so many plantations came to a standstill that the production and commerce of the province required a long stretch of time to recover from the blow. What does that mean? That when they got kicked out, the economy dropped. I'm sure they more than likely took the slaves with them. The new slave owners, who would have had to been the Spanish and the Portuguese, probably didn't know how to trade as well as them. Remember, it said that they were the earliest traders. So they had connections and networks. You can have all the slaves you want and get all the sugar you want. If you don't know how to get that sugar off, they were good at knowing how to get the product off. Later, a decree of the 2nd of March 1768 ordered all the registers containing a list of the new Christians to be destroyed, and by law, the 24 new Christians were placed on a footing of perfect civil equality with the Orthodox. It is evident then that the very many crypto small hats must have maintained their prominent position in Brazil even after the Portuguese had regained possession of it in 1654, and that it was they who brought to the country its flourishing sugar industry as well as its trade of precious stones. Watch this though. Despite this, the year 1654 marks an epoch in the annals of American Jewish history. For it was in this year that a goodly number of Brazilian Jews settled in other parts of America and thereby moved the economic center of gravity. That's crazy. So they're saying wherever they go, the bread go. Wherever they go, the bag go. Just like it is today. The change was especially profitable to one or two important islands of the West Indian archipelago, and also the neighboring coastlands, which rose in prosperity from the time of the Jewish influx in the 17th century. Barbados, which was inhabited almost solely by Jews, is a case in point. That's crazy, bro. It came under English rule in 1627. In 1641, the sugar cane was introduced, and 7 years later, the exportation of sugar began. But the sugar industry could not maintain itself. The sugar produced was so poor in quality that its price was scarcely sufficient to pay for the cost of the transport to England. Not till the exiled Dutchmen from Brazil introduced the process of refining the sugar and taught the natives. They're telling on themselves. They're telling on themselves. Now look at this. Look at this. This is crazy. Okay, so now watch this, everybody. So they're in Barbados now, right? And it's under English rule, right? Now they got sugarcane plantations. Listen closely how this is why I like this author, because he's just explaining the history. He's not even making it blatant. Some of these things you got to really read. Look what he says. The sugar produced was so poor in quality, right? So they got these slaves on these sugarcane plantations getting this sugar, but the sugar not selling because it's poor in quality. So how do we know that it's not the Jews working these plantations? Well, we know earlier because it said they had Watch this though. This is deep right here. Earlier it said they had Negro slaves, right? Now right here it's going to say they had natives, the natives of these lands. The sugar was so right, and not until the exiled Dutchmen from Brazil introduced the. So now they're saying you guys got to learn how to refine the sugar. Who did they teach to refine the sugar? Well, the same people that was on the plantation cutting the sugar cane, and taught the natives that art of drying and crystallizing the sugar. Did an improvement manifest itself? So now we have the indigenous people of the Americas and the islands in slavery to the small hats. And it says explicitly that it is that they had the Negroes on the plantations in St. Thomas. This is a book called The Jews in Modern Capitalism from 1913. As a result, the sugar exports of Barbados increased by leaps and bounds, and in 1661, Charles II was able to confer baronetcies on 13 planters who drew an annual income of 10,000 from the island. By about the year 1676, it had grown such that fewer than 400 vessels carrying aliens as a route to 11. And in 1664, Thomas Murphy introduced sugar manufacturing from Barbados into Jamaica, which is a country who soon became wealthy. Now in 1656, Spain over 3 small islands in Jamaica in 1670 miles, 2017. The colonies in Jamaica aspects. Schools and the Jews makes it pretty clear that a lot of them must have to be large development. The government, however, encouraged selling and still more Jews. The government rejected the petition market. And the Jews from Holland, so the Jews were not expelled from Jamaica, but became the first traders and merchants of the English colony. So let's take a look at Jamaica. It says in Jamaica, when the English took over, the Jews became the first traders and merchants of that English colony. Well, guess what they were doing there? This is 1671. In the 18th century, they paid all the taxes and almost entirely controlled the industry and commerce. Damn. Of other English colonies, the Jews showed a special preference for Suriname. Wow. Why? Oh, there are Israelites there. Jews had been settled there since 1644 and have received a number of privileges. Settled there doing what? What are you settled in Suriname for in 1644? Hold on a second, bro. What was going on in Suriname, 1644? Let's take a look. Indigenous settlement. So the largest nations, Arawaks, hunting, fishing, European colonization. Okay, here we go. So the first Europeans who came to Suriname were Spanish explorers and Dutch traders who visited the island, right? South America's wild coast. In 1613, Dutch trading posts, right? The first significant intensive settlement area was 1630 when the English settlers, right? They cultivated crops of tobacco, but the venture failed financially. In 1640, perhaps while the English were still at Marshall Creek, the French built an outpost near Suriname River. The governor of Barbados furnished out a vessel, a colony in Suriname, had his own colony equipped and shipped 20 guns necessary for the support of the plantation. So there 2 years later, prison forfeited and furnished settlement considered around 30 acres. Okay. In 1663, most of the work on the 50 or so plantations was done by native Indians and 3,000 African slaves. So during the time, the sources say the small hats settled in Suriname, Negroes and native Indian slaves, they had Negroes and native Indian slaves. This source is George Warren of 1667, an impartial description of Suriname. So they get here in 1644. It's an English colony. They get special privileges. What's that? Free slaves and free land, right? Of course. Whereas we have found that the Hebrew nation have proved themselves useful and beneficial to the colony. Their privileged position continued under the Dutch, to whom Suriname passed in 1667. Towards the end of the 17th century, their proportion to the rest of its inhabitants was 1 to 3. And in 1730, they owned 115 of the 344 sugar plantations. Wow. Wow. So in Suriname, there was 344 plantations. The small hats owned 115 of them. The story of the small hats in the English and Dutch colonies find a counterpart in the more important French settlements such as Martinique, Guadeloupe, and San Domingo. Here also, sugar was the source of wealth, and as in the other cases, the Jews controlled the industry and were the principal sugar merchants. The first large-scale plantation and refinery in Martinique was established in 1655 by Benjamin de Costa, who had fled there from Brazil with 1,900 co-religionists and 1,100 slaves. All right, y'all, it's so much. Oh, hold on. Now look, this is good. So remember, he tried to say that it's anti-small hat to try to say the small hats monopolized. He said that verbatim. He said it's anti if you say they monopolize. Oh, look at how the Most High works. I clicked on a random part of this video and he's using that word monopoly. Look at how the Most High works, right? Let's listen to him say it.
Want to guess how many of that number were Jews? 20. So to claim that Jews had some kind of monopoly on slaveholding is, well, pretty ridiculous.
So he said saying they had a monopoly is pretty ridiculous, right? Look at the Most High, right? Now, this source is saying that they did monopolize it. Look it says, now it must be remembered that the small hats had almost monopolized the sugar trade. How? By free slave labor, duh. By colonization, duh. By stealing land. The sugar trade, the French branch in particular, belonged to control the wealthy family. The position in which the small hats had obtained for themselves in the Central and South America was thus a powerful one, but it became even more powerful towards the end of the 17th century. The English colonies in North America entered into commercial relations with the West Indies. To this close union, which again, Jewish merchants helped to bring about, the North American continent, as we shall see, owes its existence. We have thus arrived at the point where it is essential to consider the Jewish factor in the growth of the United States at the first origins. Once more, Jewish elements combine this time to give the United States the ultimate economic form. Exactly. As we so I think we're gonna leave it at this. We're over our 2-hour mark, or we are right at our 2-hour mark. So let's end this, everybody, by giving all. He's a liar, first and foremost. You're a liar. They had a major role, probably a role bigger than any other of their white counterparts. And so we just thank the Most High for the exposing and the truth. They got hell to pay. We gonna get justice, divine retribution, and liquid reparations. Let's end this by giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh. We do so by Shem Mashiach Yahushai. Till next time, Shalom.